welcome to Talking FCB and welcome back here to the channel, guys. A news roundup coming up for you today with some big information. Of course, ahead of our Champions League game against Inter coming up this week, we have in this video an injury update, but also, aside from that, some big news today on potential discontent between the players and the current board. It's all coming up. We've got to discuss this. Let's do it. But if we start first and foremost with those injury updates, because really important right now, we've got a massive game at the Camp Nou on Wednesday against Inter. We need everybody that we possibly can to be in that team, but ultimately they've got to be 100% right. We don't want to rush anybody back. This morning, Sport have come out with a big cover, optimism with Messi. They say right now the feeling around Messi, the feeling around the club is really good with regard to Messi being available for that game on Wednesday. They say right now, again, we've heard this before, but they say he's recovered quicker than expected and he is going to be in contention to play against Inter on Wednesday night. They also go on to say there that Jordi Alba, much like Messi, is recovering well. He's recovering ahead of schedule. He could be available either against Inter or against Sevilla this week to play again in the Barça colours. But what I want to say here and now is we want to get that right. We can't be rushing Messi back every single game, because you do wonder, did we rush him back too soon against Borussia Dortmund in the same sort of situation, a big Champions League game? He came on in that game. Was he ready to come on and play? Because of course we don't want to be going down this route every single week, rushing Messi back, making him play, forcing him out there, and then again a few days or so later there's a relapse. We don't want to go down that road. Either Messi is 100% ready and he's ready to play, or he isn't. If he isn't, he should not play. Please don't rush him. Please don't risk something like that with somebody like Messi. But on the team news for today, the other thing that I have to bring you is the fact that training took place this morning with the rest of the group, of course, and Messi and Dembele were not in the full session, but they did contribute there in part of the session there with the first team ahead of that game against Inter. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow in training. That's going to be key. Messi and Dembele today involved, not the full session, but some of it tomorrow in the build-up to that game on Wednesday. Will they be there? Will they feature in that full session? But just on Ousmane Dembele, guys, of course, we still don't know exactly what the problem is with him right now. Again, it was much like Messi. He returned maybe a little bit too quickly. We don't know. And then there was that relapse. Then he broke down. We don't know if it's exactly the same problem, but it's one of many problems so far that Dembele has had since he's been at Barcelona. But I want to come out here with something that came from the Madrid media today, but it really did highlight how injury-prone Ousmane Dembele has been since he came to Barcelona. Because they came out there with a report that basically says Ousmane Dembele has only played in 33.4% of the minutes that he could have since he's arrived from Borussia Dortmund. And that is incredible. Only 33%. That's only 1/3 of the minutes that he could have played he's played in since he signed for Barca for that big transfer fee. But the other crazy thing that I always think about with Dembele, because if he was somebody who was injury prone, and he has been right throughout his career, maybe you could understand it. But at Dortmund, he didn't have these injuries. At Dortmund, he did not have these problems. So what right now is the issue, and is it going to be resolved? However, before we do move on to that talk between the players and the board, I do want to bring you something a little bit more upbeat, something a bit positive, because there was a story this morning in Mundo Deportivo. It was more of an opinion piece from one of the journalists there, and he's basically gone on to say that he believes that Valverde right now understands, finally, Valverde understands that his best trio in midfield is Sergio Busquets, Arthur Melo, and Frenkie de Jong. He's gone on to say there in MD this morning that Valverde knows now that's his tried and trusted method, and those three players now will hopefully get the majority of the minutes throughout the season when possible in that midfield trio. And if that's true, if Valverde has finally got the message, I'll be really happy. But okay, let's now move on to that talk in the Spanish media this morning. It came out in Sport. Basically, unrest and tension in the dressing room between the key players in that dressing room and the board, and in particular, Bartomeu, the president. According to Sport right now, they say things are not feeling good between the players, between the board. There is a breakdown right now. There's a bit of a blame game going on. The players seem to be blaming the board for the bad form. The board seem to be saying to the players, go out there and do your job. Sport go on to say basically that first and foremost, the two players they would mention in particular would be Gerard Piqué and Lionel Messi. The one thing they say about Messi is the fact that he came out with their paper, did a public interview there on a number of things. He spoke in that interview about Barcelona's pursuit of Neymar Jr. this summer, and Messi seemed to imply that maybe Barcelona could have done a bit more, but we just don't know how things go on behind the scenes. So they basically say there that Messi could have been firing shots at the board for what they did over the summer and the fact they didn't bring Neymar back. But the much more important topic here, and the much bigger unrest, is regard to Pique and Bartomeu. Because right now, there is serious problems between those two individuals. Basically because after the last two away games, firstly in Granada and then at the weekend against Getafe, in both games, Pique has come out after the game and spoken quite openly, as Pique does, in the public domain. He's spoken about issues which would relate back to the board. Now, Pique hasn't come out and formally addressed and really taken shots at Bartomeu and his board, but at the same time, he has said some very interesting things which you could interpret as being criticism there of the Barcelona board. For instance, after the game there against Granada, Pique came out, we lost the game of course, and he said, look, I don't want to make excuses, but I feel like the pre-season we had with Barcelona simply wasn't good for us. It didn't do us any favours, we hadn't had enough training sessions, instead we were more focused on flying all the way around the world, and of course Barcelona bringing in big money from that, but was it good for the players? That was one thing there that Pique said, which the board might have thought, hang on a minute, that's a bit of a shot at us. We organised pre-season, that was something that we did, and Pique clearly there not happy with that planning. But it was actually what he came out and said after the Getafe game, which has really got the ball rolling behind the scenes with Pique and the board. He came out after Getafe, and he basically said, in as many words, he felt the board used journalists to come out with stories about the players, about the performances, to basically put pressure on the players, but they don't do it face to face. The board doesn't do it to their face. The board there, Bartomeu, will go out to the local media, say some things, and then that will make its way back to the players to send his message. And he basically went out and said, yeah, the local media, I feel, are very much involved in putting pressure on certain Barcelona players, putting pressure on the team as a sort of mixed message coming from the top. That was what he said there, and it was basically, again, looking at the board, looking at the way they go about their business, and Pique not happy, clearly, with Bartomeu, and Bartomeu is equally not happy with Pique. Apparently today, a meeting was called to really thrash out things between the two of them. They've got to talk things over, they've got to try and find some sort of resolution. Pique's not happy, but Bartomeu, according as well to the local media, again the media, very much involved in this, make of that what you will, but Bartomeu feels that Pique is more interested in those topics away from the field, in terms of the Davis Cup, the tennis stuff that he's involved in, also of course the other club that he owns, Andorra FC. Bartomeu believes that Pique has taken his eye off the ball just a little bit in terms of what he's doing on the field with regard to all the stuff that he has going on off the pitch. So Bartomeu unhappy with Pique. Pique clearly there, after both of those games, coming out and openly saying things aren't good. But let's just wait and see what happens now in the coming days, whether this sort of thing can be resolved in a meeting. But finally, guys, I've got to tell you something very important as well about the voting process with regards to the next presidential election at Barcelona. Victor Font, of course, is a big candidate, one of the favoured people, I feel, to get into power in 2021, because Victor Font has officially announced that he's received support from the sufficient amount of socios that he needed to request the implementation of electronic voting during the next elections in 2021. And I just want to explain here why that's very important. Right now, in Barcelona, when it comes to a presidential election, you cannot vote electronically. You cannot vote online, you can't vote by things like that, because basically, Barcelona have ensured that right now, we're stuck in the past. You can only vote if you personally there, as a soci, go to the stadium. The problem is, many of the Barcelona socios, yes, they do live in Barcelona, but many of them may not live right next to the stadium. Many of them might live outside the country. Many of them might be halfway across the world by now, since they first signed up to be a soci. And of course, everybody deserves to make their voices heard. But Bartomeu, the current regime, were very intent on actually sticking with the only voting at the stadium, only voting there by the old-fashioned ways, simply because it was easier there to control the propaganda. Because, of course, they have a big influence there in the local media. They can put things in papers, they can put things in writing there that many of the voters, they will read. They can't control anything outside of that, and for that reason, they didn't want the votes to be done electronically. Victor Font, though, has now got the support that he needs from the socios to implement that electronic voting and hopefully there take Barcelona to the next level into the 21st century, and hopefully now that will lead to to better results. So that brings us to an end in today's news roundup, guys. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. A lot to discuss today, wasn't there? From Messi's injury, from the situation right now, ahead of that game against Inter. Do you feel that Messi will be risked? Do you feel that Messi will be ready to play in this game? And of course, please do let me know your full thoughts on everything we have discussed, from the board there, the discontent, Piqué's words. What do you make of it all? How are you going to interpret those kind of words? Let me know in the comments down below. And coming up tomorrow, get ready for it. Inter against Barça at the Camp Nou. All the build-up, it'll be coming up for you guys. But until next time, as always, Visca El Barça.